Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Backchannel. It's 9 o'clock on the nose. And here we are, brand new day. It's Thursday, March 10, 2022. I'm Anthony Davis. And hopefully you'll spend your morning with me and we'll chat and get to know each other and just do a whole bunch of, we'll just do a whole bunch of chat about what's happening in the news. There's a lot to look at today, so maybe you'll kind of stick around and we'll work it all out together. We're going to look through the morning papers in just a few moments, find out what's happening around this amazing country. Stacey's already joined us. She's on the stream. You can do the same. You can wake up your Echo show, say the word say, and then your message. You can also send a message via backchannel.tv. And finally, what's the third way? Oh, yeah, that's right, YouTube. Have you heard of that? It's a whole new thing where they put videos on the internet. So go to YouTube and search Anthony Davis Backchannel, and then you'll be able to take part in the show there as well. Lots of ways to be in touch, lots of ways to enjoy the program, and we're going to look at the morning newspapers in just a moment. First, let me tell you about what's coming up. The White House is saying that Russia could be planning a chemical or biological weapon attack in Ukraine. So we'll talk about the tactics that the Russians are using. The U.S. Capitol riot trial tearing families apart when Guy Reffitt became the first person to stand trial for storming the U.S. Capitol. He had to face not only a judge and jury, but also his own son on the witness stand. And also a bizarre case that's been making international headlines. A man arrested on a COVID ward in a Glasgow hospital being accused by the US authorities of being a fugitive who faked his own death to evade justice. We'll look into this unlikely story in just a little while. And also, for today's Women's History Month, I should say, we're going to look at the trailblazing American actress and comedian Lucille Ball. Do you know, I think the jury's out on whether female comedians like being called comedians. Do you know what I mean about that? I honestly think that they would much rather just be called comedians, because I don't think that a comedian. I think a comedian is a non-gendered word. I mean, comedienne is obviously it's trying to make a kind of French, female version of the word. But the reality is that comedian doesn't suggest that it's male. I mean, maybe back then they might have said comedienne because they wanted to differentiate between the men and the one woman who was doing comedy. I mean, literally, the ratio of men to women doing comedy in the 1950s and 60s compared to now, it's ridiculous. And I really feel like the men didn't want the women to step on their comedy toes, so they preferred to say comedienne, because that put them into a separate genre, rather than where the men sat, which was the comedians owning comedy. Comedienne, it's a little bit like having a small kitchen. Do you know where I'm going with this? It's not quite a full kitchen, it's a kitchenette. I really feel like the kitchenette would love to be a kitchen, but can't quite get there. Doesn't quite have a full oven, just has a microwave maybe. And I feel like this is how American comedians, male comics, wanted to protect themselves from their female counterparts, because they were scared of them, because some of them were brilliant. I would say that an actor should cover all genders. I think so, yeah. And I would say that most of the people that I know who are actors, who are girls, say I'm an actor. I think so these days, because it just brings a relative equality. Because look at Hollywood. Hollywood is, we know it's so gendered and racist. And so what are you going to do? Say I'm a black actress? A blacktress? You're going to create a whole new genre? Let's all just be actors. I really feel like, the times are changing, and the way that we brand ourselves, it's a little bit like pronouns and all of these things. It's really necessary to just be who you want to be, not what somebody else wants you to be. So don't move to Florida. That's all I can say. Oh, they took away Best Male and Best Female awards at the UK Brit Awards. So the Brit Awards is like music. It's the... What does it stand for? The Britannia Awards? Is it Britannia? I think it is. Yeah, because I think Britannia was a record label, like a very early record label. So they're not doing male and female artists there anymore. That's so good. Just artists. The best artist. Let the best artist win. Right? I mean, we've come on in so many ways, and yet in other ways we're going back in time. Just mentioning Florida, like banning abortion today, talking about, removing any reference to LGBTQ+ from schools. It literally is like going back to the 1950s. It's almost like the rest of the world is going to evolve, and some of these states are going to end up just being stuck in time, like waving Confederate flags and thinking that's acceptable. Not acceptable. Okay, let's jump onto the newspapers this morning. The Florida Times-Union is first. Stacey's having a backyard barbecue dinner for lunch. In a kitchenette or a fully featured kitchen? Do you know, I often equate the kitchen to success, to like your success. So if you have a kitchen that has a central island unit that is plumbed for both electricity and water, you've made it. There is no higher achievement in life than to have a kitchen with a central island unit that you can cook at, you can charge devices, or you can plug in your blender, and you can wash up in, where it has plumbing and running water, and you can walk all the way around it, and maybe even have a few bar stools on one side so people can watch you prepare the vegetables. Well, the American fridge is quite something. I mean, I have lived in apartments in London smaller than some American refrigerators. In fact, in my first apartment, Carla, in Fulham, in London, I couldn't open the refrigerator door and be in the kitchen at the same time. I had to lean into the kitchen. The swing on the door took up the entire floor space of the kitchen. It was very much a kitchenette. There was no oven. There was a hob. There was a microwave with a grill in it. But in order to open the fridge, I had to get out of the kitchen. Great days. Ironically, the Florida Times-Union leads with DeSantis taking more extreme views. It says just when it seemed like Florida couldn't push back any harder against COVID-19 conventional wisdom, Governor Ron DeSantis in recent days has opened up a new frontier in his war on public health guidance. DeSantis has long emphasized his opposition to COVID-19 mandates, but now he's going further. Instead of saying that we shouldn't be forced to comply with public health measures, he affirmatively is telling certain groups to ignore that guidance altogether, including asking high school students to unmask last week and saying on Monday that Florida will tell healthy children not to get the COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, this guy should be in prison. He shouldn't be the governor. The guy should be in prison. He is a danger to public health. And yet he is lauded as a future conservative candidate for president. The guy should be in prison. He's a criminal. The announcement on Monday marks the governor's first unequivocal vaccine stance, anti-vaccine stance, one that defies the CDC recommendations. DeSantis' recent actions go beyond the conservative consensus against vaccine and mask mandates and showcase the governor's determination to stay at the vanguard of COVID contrarianism, even if it contradicts his previous anti-mandate statements that he was promoting freedom and not discouraging people from protecting themselves. DeSantis says he is simply telling people the truth about the science behind masking and vaccines. Yeah, he's lying. He's basically lying. He can see that by being controversial, it is going to make people like him. You know, that's the tragedy of this. He thinks that his controversial behavior is what gives him a kind of an edge, you know? And it's so offensive. So offensive. Because, you know, fundamentally, this guy is an idiot. The guy's an idiot. And he's kind of dressing it up like he has insider knowledge, and he quite clearly doesn't. Anyway, just trying a new little light over here. What do we think to this? There we go. Let's warm that up a little bit. It's kind of good, isn't it? It's like a new little light. What do we think? Is that too much light on the man? Because it's a little ring light. You can see it if I move my glasses. Yeah, well, it's over there now. There's one up here and there's one over here. I mean, I'm literally surrounded by lights. I do wish this camera didn't autofocus so much. It drives me crazy. Constantly focusing back and forward and back and forward. I'm like, give me a break with the focusing already. Maybe I need to stop waving my hands around. That's part of the problem. Let's go back to the papers. Sorry. So DeSantis, as we know, public enemy number one, or my enemy number one. Students oppose bill with walkouts, it says. Some Duval County students are outraged after a bill that will ban teaching lessons on sexual orientation and gender identity in elementary schools. Has been approved by the Florida Senate and is poised to become law. The Parental Rights in Education Act, which has been nicknamed by critics as the Don't Say Gay bill for its potential to stifle conversations about identity in the classroom, was approved by the Senate in a 22-17 vote and is now one signature away from becoming law in the state of Florida. DeSantis says he will sign the bill into law. So in Jacksonville, students at several high schools across Duval County Public Schools, including Mandarin, Terry Parker, Atlantic Coast, and Stanton High Schools, organized and showed opposition against the bill. Grace Warner, who's 17, participated in a walkout last week at Mandarin High School. I mean, I don't know why the president hasn't got involved in this. Why is he pretending that this is acceptable and normal? That to be so anti-minorities is in some way a positive way to kind of, or positive direction to take a state in. You know, it's like, it's basically prejudice. It's just encouraging prejudice. And this is my greatest fear about it, is what you're doing is if you've got kids growing up in the state of Florida, I seem to have cut my hand quite badly. Who knew? If you've got kids growing up in the state of Florida and they think it's normal to have these bills, because obviously the bills are obviously created by the authorities and therefore they're going to act as role models for these children. They're going to think it's normal to be prejudiced against a certain group. That's what they're going to do. They're going to grow up being prejudiced themselves. Okay, that's the Florida Times Union this morning. Sika has joined us, first time from Texas. Welcome, Sika. We'll get to the Texas newspapers in just a moment. Florida Today is next, which is the same as Florida Yesterday, except it's a more recent edition. Here we go. Florida Today leads with Parents Air Library Book Concerns. Protesters decry mums for liberty outside board meeting. Brevard Public School Board meeting on Tuesday. Parents aired their concerns about books being removed from school libraries, and a school board member asked the district to ensure none of its investments include stock in Russian companies. I mean, they're just going for it now, aren't they? There's just no intellectual analysis of any of this. It's like they throw random hate words into the sky and hope they land somewhere. It's the Marjorie Taylor Greene approach, you know? Don't engage the brain, just say stuff very loudly. A member of conservative parent group Mums for Liberty sent a list of books allegedly containing sexual content to school board chair Misty Belford. I love the fact that Misty Belford's name sounds like some kind of pornographic film actress. And yet she's the one who's like banning the books. What was it? Years ago, they used to work out your porn name by being your, what was it, your mother's maiden name and your pet's name? Yeah, mine was Gaylord Fishman. Anyway, long story short. It was your nickname at school. I think it was supposed to be your nickname at school, and then your mother's maiden name or something, wasn't it? Anyway, long story short, let's not go into that now. It's too much. We shouldn't be having this conversation. It's too early in the morning for this type of conversation. But anyway, I just think it's ironic that Misty Belford is the one who's sorting out these books. Gilberto, welcome. What was the other? What was the other thing? It wasn't your porn name. There was another one that you could do that was less inappropriate, where you took two names. Wasn't it your? Was there something else? Gave you a something else name? Yeah, but you ended up with your something name. It wasn't an adult entertainment name. It was something else. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, maybe you can remind me if you happen to know. Anyway, a member of the conservative parent group Mums for Liberty sent a list of books allegedly containing sexual content to school board chair Misty Belford over the weekend. Several other members of the public have contacted board members with worries that the district will remove books related to black history and LGBTQ identity, or the district will remove books their own children will benefit from reading. Misty Belford. I've got to move on from this. I'll just keep laughing. SpaceX pokes fun at Russia amid Starlink satellite launch. Yes, the Falcon 9 rocket boosted off the company's latest batch of Starlink internet satellites to low Earth orbit on Wednesday. But not before launch engineers poked fun at Russia's recent comments on the US space vehicles. Time to let the American broomstick fly and hear the sounds of freedom, SpaceX launch engineer Julia Black called out just before the 8:45 liftoff from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I love the fact that they're now calling it Space Force. It's so embarrassing. You know, Space Force is, of course, this concept that Donald Trump came up with on the fly and then liked the sound of it, and because he's big into, like, you know, branding and marketing, he was like, yeah, we can do something with that. And then stole the Star Trek logo, and the rest, as they say, is history. Would you believe the Steve Carell Space Force satirical comedy that's on Netflix got recommissioned for a second season? It just dropped. Yeah. Where he's basically he's he's like, he's the head of Space Force. I think I might sneeze. Just bear that in mind. It could happen at any time. I'm worried there's now too much brightness here. Oh, I love the cough button, but the problem was I bought another device that makes the mic louder, and it's not compatible with the cough button. You know, you can't have everything in this world. This is what I've learned. A little human sacrifice is sometimes necessary. Gilberto, Sheikah, Stacy, stay with me. I'm doing my best this morning. There's a lot going on. So basically, the Cape Canaveral Space Force launch director announced as they were doing the countdown, time to let the American broomstick fly and hear the sounds of freedom, which apparently was a bit of a two fingers up to to Russia. The rocket successfully launched 48 Starlink internet satellites to orbit. 48 from one rocket? And then it returned to land on the Just Read the Instructions drone ship a few minutes later. I mean, the technology that SpaceX has now, where they're able to send these rockets and return these rockets. And have you seen the way they land backwards? It's incredible. They land vertically and they land perfectly. It just blows my mind. It's almost like someone has rewound the videotape. Okay, so that's Florida Today. Let's go to the Miami Herald next. They lead this morning with what does Don't Say Gay bill mean for parents and students? Do you know, I'm so pleased that all of the newspapers are covering this story in this way. It's very important. Florida teachers could soon be turning to Tallahassee for direction to try to figure out what they can and can't do with their lesson plans, in particular those related to gender identity and sexual orientation. That's because educators are likely to face a new law barring classroom instruction on those subjects from kindergarten to third grade. They won't be allowed to teach those subjects in other grades in a way that is not age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate as determined by state standards. The legislature on Tuesday passed the Parental Rights in Education bill, which opponents have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. The bill now awaits Ron DeSantis' signature, which he's definitely going to give because, he's just one of those guys that just likes to be as controversial as possible and he doesn't care about who the victims are. Because this is what you have to consider, isn't it? I'm just moving this line. This is what we have to consider. And this is what Ron DeSantis doesn't care about. There's always a victim. Think about that for a second. There's always a victim. So you might want to go and ban abortion, or you might want to go and ban LGBTQ plus discussion or books or, similar in schools. There's always a victim. Somebody is going to suffer, whether it be an individual or whether it be a whole generation that could suffer as a result. And that's my worry about all of this stuff. DeSantis does it as a kind of short-termist thing, thinks he's got away with it, ha-ha. And the reality is, it's too much, it's too much. I'm changing the light color just as an experiment. I'm kind of enjoying, messing around with this. I don't know if you think it's, worthy of me messing around, but I'm just trying different, the only way you can really try these things out is when you're doing it. Try it when you're doing it. Okay, let's move on a little bit now. Let's talk about Ukraine, because the tragedy of yesterday was that there was this airstrike that hit a maternity hospital. And I have surmised, I don't know if it's true, but I have surmised that it looks like they've used a dirty bomb to do this. Because if the Russian military yesterday confirmed, the Russian Defense Department confirmed that they are using what are called barometric bombs. And a barometric bomb is a vacuum bomb. We talked about these a little bit last week, where they suck all the oxygen out of the space. And then that causes the blast to be greater than you can imagine. And I was just looking at the pictures of and including the video that Zelensky himself posted of the hospital. And what was interesting is the blast looked like it had sucked everything out of every window. But strangely, the buildings were all still standing. And that suggested to me that this was some kind of vacuum bomb. Where it didn't obliterate the building, it just obliterated everything inside of it. Wherever there was oxygen, got obliterated. It says a Russian airstrike devastated a maternity hospital on Wednesday in the besieged port city of Mariupol, amid growing warnings from the West that Moscow's invasion is about to take a more brutal and indiscriminate turn. Ukrainian officials said the attack wounded at least 17 people. The ground shook more than a mile away when the Mariupol complex was hit by a series of blasts that blew out windows and ripped away much of the front of one building. Police and soldiers rushed to the scene to evacuate victims, carrying out a pregnant and bleeding woman on a stretcher as light snow drifted down on burning and mangled cars and trees shattered by the blast. Another woman wailed as she clutched her child. In the courtyard, a blast crater extended to at least 2 stories deep. Today, Russia committed a huge crime, said Vladimir Nikulin, top regional police officer, while standing in the rubble. I mean, this has got to a point now where it's almost as if the Russians have crossed a line. Putin has crossed a line. And I was thinking about what Russia is going to look like after this ends. Now, let's say hypothetically, because this is what Putin's probably going to do. Putin is going to claim victory at some point, isn't he? He's going to run out. He's going to run out of troops. He's going to run out of equipment. The Ukrainians are going to put up a really good fight, but Putin will stop, but claim victory, even though he hasn't won. Right? He'll claim victory, and he'll claim, the intellectuals are fleeing. That's true. And so what we're left with is we're going to be left with Russia. Think about Russia now, or Russia like 4 weeks ago, and Russia now. Russia 4 weeks ago involved Vladimir Putin visiting the White House, Vladimir Putin visiting 10 Downing Street, Vladimir Putin speaking at the UN Security Council, Vladimir Putin speaking at NATO. It's never going to happen again. Off the back of this, Putin and whichever Russian leader will never be invited to join in with Western organizations ever again. You know, what he has done here, he's isolated Russia, not just in terms of sanctions and trade and Pepsi Cola and McDonald's and Starbucks. That's small fry. He is never going to be allowed into the White House ever again. He basically has severed ties with the West by nature of the behavior here. That's what he's done. And that is problematic, isn't it, for the people of Russia? Because I'm trying to remember how many people are in Russia. I think it's about 140 million people. It might be more. It might be nearer 300 million. But it's a lot of people. So the effect of this is not just going to be here on Ukraine, where there are 44 million people. And now 2 million people have already fled as refugees. And plenty more will come, because obviously he's going to devastate the whole country. You know, there will be nothing left. They'll have to rebuild that country from scratch. And they will. The resilience of the Ukrainian people is not in question. The resilience of Zelensky is not in question. The resilience of the 5 people who are carrying this pregnant woman on a stretcher, bleeding from this hospital. Their resilience is not in question. But my fear now is for the innocent Russians. Because, you know, Russian people are not... They're not the Russian military. They're the Russian people. The Russian people don't want this. We've seen protests all over Russia saying they don't want this. And they're being arrested. There's been like 7,000 people arrested now. So if Russia is going to be isolated from the world, what's Russia going to look like? It's going to basically go back to like Cold War era Russia, where the only thing people have to drink is vodka. To keep warm, vodka. To replace a meal, vodka. I mean, I'm being hypothetical, but you understand my point. You know, Russia without the trappings of the modern Western world is going to turn into a Cold War era, you know, Soviet state. It's going to be the USSR. I mean, it's going to be a horrific place to live if it's cut off from the rest of the world. And he's blown it now, hasn't he? Putin. He doesn't care. The guy's like, you know, getting on a bit. He doesn't care. This did not go the way he thought it was going to go. He thought this was going to be an easy win. What he didn't consider, because he's never been exposed to it, is the resilience of free people. He didn't consider the fact that people who live in a free country are free to do whatever they want, including defend their own country, defend their territory, defend their people, defend their land. And he didn't factor that in because, you know, Russia, it wouldn't work like that in Russia. People attacked Russia. It would be militant. It wouldn't be like this. So I just believe that the world is going to look very different off the back of this conflict. You know? Yes, Ukraine will be rebuilt. But I fear for the millions of people in Russia whose lives are going to get considerably worse as a result of this. You know, Russia will have to reinvent itself, and it will reinvent itself on a budget. You know, it's going to spend a lot of money in this. You know, it's all of the access to finance. It's all being taken away. All of Russia's money. It's going to suddenly, the ruble has already crashed. But I mean, this is going to end up being a very impoverished country with very poor people. And they won't be able to work and trade with the international community. So think of all the people that were working for foreign companies that were based in Russia. They're not going to be able to have those jobs anymore. What jobs are they going to get instead? This is where it's at now. This is the problem. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the inadvertent collapse of Russia. Everybody thinks this is all about the collapse of Ukraine. It's not. This is about the collapse of Russia. This is going to backfire on Putin so much, there'll be nothing left of his country. Economically, the buildings might still be standing. The Kremlin might look the same from the outside. But it's very different. And you know what worries me the most about this is that the conservatives moaning that gas prices in the US are going to go up too much because of this. That's all they can see. Well, gas prices are going to go up. And I'm like, yeah, they will. And, that's all of us doing our little bit to support the people of Ukraine. We have to pay a little bit more at the pump for their freedom. Gas prices in America have been falsely too cheap for too long. That's why the car became king in America, because oil was so cheap and gas was so cheap and, people just took it for granted. And now gas and oil is like almost at the right price now. This is how much it should be. And people can't get their heads around that because they've been used to this kind of easy breezy freedom. And actually, the world is not easy and breezy and free anymore. The world is complex, and we rely on pipelines and we rely on shared utilities. And if a war breaks out, then we have to accept that that's going to affect the way we live. And if you took more of an interest in geopolitics, then maybe it wouldn't happen. But turning your back on it and ignoring it, or even worse, supporting Putin, which is what Trump and a whole bunch of conservatives lawmakers are doing, celebrating Vladimir Putin. I mean, those comments that Trump made about Putin being a genius and really smart last week, how silly does he look now after we see a hospital blown up with a vacuum bomb? Does he still think Putin is smart? Does he still want to go on record and say that, I watched a little bit yesterday of the most recent interview with Trump is some stupid, kids podcast that he did. He didn't know what he was doing. It's 45 minutes long. I'm about 7 minutes into it. I really need to watch the rest. The guy's an idiot. I mean, he just doesn't know anything about the world. Just knows nothing about the world. Some friends of mine are on his mailing list, email mailing list, and apparently he sent an email out this morning saying, help me raise money for a new Trump Force One. He basically is now asking his supporters to buy him an aeroplane. Because, the old Trump 757 that he was flying around on before he was president, apparently that's mothballed now. He can't afford to maintain it. It's in a hangar in Orange County. One engine is shrink-wrapped and it's just fallen into disrepair. Trump does not have money. Talks about it, but he doesn't, can't afford to run an aeroplane. And, I've asked lots of, I've asked lots of people who study this what all of this boils down to, this whole movement, DeSantis banning talk of LGBTQ+, Trump, getting on the side of Putin, all of this stuff, the whole thing comes back to one thing, fundamentally, every time, fundraising. This is what it is. It all goes back to fundraising. And this is how these people make money, off the back of gullible supporters who actually don't hardly have any money, but they think if they give the last penny that they have to Donald Trump or to Ron DeSantis or to Steve Bannon, I mean, his podcast is an absolute eye-opener as to what the thinking is, you know. They think that they're going to get saved. You know, this is why they call this campaign now the Save America campaign. Save America. From what? From what? Save America from... Yes. That's right. Yeah, Donald Trump went on this podcast yesterday. I started watching it. It's videotaped. It's basically four dudes who go to Mar-a-Lago, and through this UFC friend, they had a connection with Trump, and they do their podcast from Mar-a-Lago. And I watched it, and I only got 7 minutes into the 47 minutes. But I have to tell you, even just from the very beginning, I was like, this is insane. Like, the guy is completely mad. Like, he is completely mad. On Wednesday, former president sat down with Full Send podcast for nearly an hour. Why? Who knows? It does have more than 1 million YouTube subscribers, and the likes of Donald Trump Jr. And MAGA favorite Candace Owen. Hang on, let me just mute this. It's making a noise. Hang on. These pages, they've all got like audio on them. I don't know how you mute it. Anyway, let me carry on reading. I'll carry on reading. It's going to be fine. Yes, Donald Trump Jr. and MAGA favorite Candace Owens have appeared on it. During that conversation, the topic of Ukraine and Russia's invasion came up, which led to this exchange between host Kyle Forgeard and the 45th president. Forgeard says, "What do you see happening next then? Because it seems like the tensions are high. How does this all end? Is this going to be like a long-term thing? How do you see it unfolding?" Right, this is a question about Ukraine, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Trump's response: "Well, and I said this a long time ago, if this happens, we are playing right into their hands. Green energy, the windmills, they don't work. They're too expensive. They kill all the birds. They ruin your landscapes. And yet the environmentalists love the windmills. And I've been preaching this for years, the windmills. And I've had them way down. But the windmills are the most expensive energy you can have, and they don't work. And by the way, they last a period of 10 years, and by the time they start rusting and rotting all over the place, nobody ever takes them down. They just go onto the next piece of prairie or land and destroy that." This is not a joke. This is actually what he said. When asked how Russia's invasion into Ukraine ends, the former president of the United States went into a riff about windmills. And while that is super weird, given the question he was asked, it's not an uncharacteristic riff for Trump. He's been consistent on very few things in his life, but his hatred of windmills, which are incidentally called wind farms, they're not windmills, right? And these are called wind turbines. A windmill doesn't have a turbine in it, you know? A windmill is to run a mill. It's a water mill or an windmill. Mills are operated to do milling of grain. That's what a windmill is. This is a wind turbine to generate energy and electricity. And do you know how big they are now? If the first ones that came out, let's say on a scale they were this big, right? The wind turbines, let's say they were this big, right? Scaled up to like gigantic. The equivalent windmill, using his phrase, is now this big. They are now 10 times bigger than they were. And the bigger the wind turbine, the more energy. These things are gigantic. They're gigantic. And they're incredible. They are free energy for planet Earth. Free. And they last a lot longer than 10 years. That was like the original ones when they first came out. They hadn't worked on the technology. Do you honestly think that they would build a wind turbine that's like 1,000 feet high and have it only last 10 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. Apparently, when Trump bought land in Scotland to build a golf course and resort, he opposed a plan to build wind turbines on the country's coast. "I want to see the ocean, I don't want to see windmills," he said in 2006. In a speech to the Scottish Parliament in 2012, Trump went further. "I am an expert on tourism. If you dot your landscape with these horrible, horrible structures, you will do tremendous damage. Many countries have decided they don't want wind because it doesn't work without massive subsidies. It kills massive amounts of birds and wildlife, and there are lots of other reasons." I just love the fact that he's so light on detail. He eventually lost that fight as 11 wind turbines were built in 2018. He also frequently criticized windmills during his presidency. In a 2019 speech to House Republicans, he said, "If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations, your house just went down 75% in value." And they say the noise causes cancer. Just think about that for a second, what he says out loud, that noise causes cancer. Just think about how stupid you need to be to even say those words out loud. Later the same year, Trump went on another rhetorical screed against windmills. "I've never understood wind," he said. "I know windmills very much." I mean, just think about even just that phrase. "I know windmills very much." I mean, the guy is like a child. "I know windmills very much. They're noisy, they kill the birds. You want to see a bird graveyard? Go under a windmill someday, and you'll see more birds than you ever see in your life." Oh, what, in the sea? What, they're just floating in the sea, are they? Idiot. So yeah, he doesn't like windmills. But what Trump was trying to say in his response to Ukraine, well, if you had to guess, he wanted to talk about how America has to become more energy independent, a point on which he and President Joe Biden agree, so they aren't dependent on oil from countries like Russia and Iran. And that progress of energy independence has been slowed by liberals who are pushing for green energy rather than more fossil fuel-driven energy. But man, there's a whole lot of elisions of thought in Trump's answer. Major logic gaps and, explanations for what he's saying. I mean, it's the lack of logic. Saying stuff out loud and doing it with such confidence that you give the impression that you somehow know what you're talking about, when quite clearly you don't. Doesn't know what he's talking about. I do think that his supporters are starting to realize that the guy's just making everything up. It's 10 to 10 here on the West Coast. Edgar's joined us. Hank has joined us. Gilberto is with us. Stacy, Melinda, Shika. Thank you for hanging out this morning. Russian bombs hospital amid truce is the headline on the front of the LA Times. It says, with basic survival in Ukraine growing increasingly precarious, civilian evacuation efforts sputtered yet again on Wednesday as Russian bombs slammed into a maternity hospital. Ukraine's government had announced a day-long ceasefire for several corridors around the country that were designated for the safe exit of residents. The routes covered some of the hardest-hit areas, including the southern port of Mariupol, where hundreds of thousands of civilians have been trapped for days with no electricity and water and dwindling supplies of food and medicine. But late Wednesday afternoon, Russia appeared to break the ceasefire when bombs hit a Mariupol hospital complex, injuring 17. Images showed emergency responders carrying a bloodied pregnant woman through a courtyard littered with mangled cars. The bombs added to the misery of a blockaded city, where hungry residents have begun breaking into stores and officials dug a mass grave to bury dozens of soldiers and civilians killed in recent days. President Zelensky called the hospital attack beyond an atrocity and appealed again to the West to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine. I mean, just explain the no-fly zone situation. I mean, this has the potential to really unleash World War III if there was to be a no-fly zone. And this is why Biden and NATO are so vehemently against it at this stage. I'm not saying that won't change. Something's going to change. This is the thing about politics and war, is that events change things. Something might happen. This could be the line in the sand, hitting a maternity hospital. That could be the thing that basically becomes the event that stops the war. I don't know. It hasn't played out yet. But my point is that, a lot of the experts say that Putin is just going to pretend that he won. A little bit like Donald Trump pretending he won the election and just kind of living his own life saying that he's the president, Because that's what he's doing. He thinks he's the president. Of course, all ex-presidents get called Mr. President. So as far as he's concerned, he's still the president. He loves it. He gets his security detail and he lives in the Winter White House, Mar-a-Lago, this horrific, ostentatious, fake gold palace in West Palm Beach. It's horrific. And there he's the king of the castle. There was that awkward video posted the other day of him arriving at dinner, a communal dinner at the Mar-a-Lago restaurant, and encouraging the crowds to clap for him. Like standing there, like doing this, as if to say, come on, it's me. It was just so grim to think that, this is the life that he leads now. He just wants to be surrounded by sycophants. Also on the front of the LA Times, EPA lets states set its own emission rules. This is very interesting, actually, for me here in California. It says California is back in the driver's seat as it steers the nation towards a future of cleaner cars and light trucks. The Biden administration on Wednesday reinstated the state's authority to set motor vehicle pollution standards stricter than federal governments. That includes tighter restrictions on greenhouse gas emissions. The decision announced by the U.S. Environment Protection Agency reverses an attempt by the Trump administration to block the state from using its vast market power to push the auto industry in greener direction. The 2019 revocation of its waiver from the federal standard put California and the states that follow its lead on pollution limits into regulatory limbo, casting a mood of uncertainty across the Automobile Association. This is truly important, EPA Administrator Michael Reagan told The Times, not just for the people in California, but for the nation as a whole. We are proudly reaffirming California's long-standing authority to lead in this area. Important, yes, said Mark Wakefield, who heads up the automobile group at consulting firm Alex Partners, but not shocking. It wasn't even certain the Trump-era decision would survive court challenges, he said. Very few automakers had assumed California would lose their battle with Trump. Think about that, right? There's a climate crisis, and he said it again yesterday, Trump on that podcast, because I watched this bit. He, once again, because he doesn't know what climate change is, he refers to it as clean air and clean water. He says, when I was president, we had the cleanest air and the cleanest water. Right, that's what he thinks climate change is. He genuinely doesn't care, doesn't know, never asked, nothing to do with him. The guy is like living in a time warp. No concept of the temperature of the surface of the planet changing and the consequences of freak weather events. None of it. Wouldn't even occur to him. The guy looked at the eclipse, remember? Some gas stations notorious for high prices charge upwards of $7 a gallon. Who's buying it and why? It says gas prices in Los Angeles have climbed to new heights this week, with Angelenos shelling out more than $5.50 a gallon on average at the pump. But for customers at a handful of notorious gas stations across town, $5.50 would be a bargain. These stations are the mysterious outliers of the LA petroleum landscape, advertising $6.95, $6.99 or even $7.05 for a gallon of regular grade, seemingly in defiance of economic sense. Mention their intersections and many Angelenos gravely nod, their eyes growing wide. How can that place at Fairfax and San Vicente, or La Cienega and Beverly, or downtown on Alameda, right across from Olvera Street, I know where all these places are, by the way, it's wonderful living here, charge such wild prices? What dark secrets do they hide, and who's desperate enough to buy gas there? With a new federal ban on Russian oil nudging pump prices still higher, the Times set out to find answers at 3 of the priciest gas stations in town. I tell you why they're doing it. Because they can. Because they can. No other reason. They're just, don't think for a second that gas companies are good people. They're not. I mean, I'm not criticizing the guy that runs the front desk and takes your money. And, it's not his fault. But these oil companies and these gas companies, they are all about profit. They don't care about anything else. They just care about profit. And that's why if you look at the biggest companies in the world, these oil companies and these gas companies and these energy companies, they're always at the top of the leaderboard with tech companies. They make so much money. Let's have a nice story now. Let's change the subject just for a second because I want to talk about P22. Do you remember, Carla, the other day I mentioned P22 and you thought I was making it up? P22 is the name of the lion, the mountain lion that lives here in Los Angeles. The headline is, guess who? P22 roams Silver Lake. Sometime around dusk on Tuesday, the celebrity mountain lion known as P22 made his way along Silver Lake Boulevard without much fanfare. The 123-pound big cat managed to traverse 3.5 miles of residential neighborhoods from his usual stomping grounds around the Hollywood sign in Griffith Park to a spot not far from the Silver Lake Reservoir. Whatever major roads or backyards P22 crossed is unclear, but his route took him to Barclay Circle. Oh my goodness, Barclay Circle! That's where I go tap dancing. That's the street where my tap dancing class is. Isn't that crazy? That's where Howard lives. That's where and ironically, Howard is actually the education correspondent for the LA Times. He also teaches tap. But literally the mountain lion was in his street. And it's not a big street. That's where the big cat locked eyes with Chris Blim standing just a few yards away. He was talking to a friend when something triggered a light on his neighbor's doorbell camera. At first he thought the animal was a coyote, but he quickly realized it was a mountain lion. We're just standing there looking at each other and the light goes off, he said, and the one thing you see is the eyes, and then when the heart drops, this is not a house cat, he thought. It's a blooming mountain lion. But the thing is, there's something wonderful about the fact that this is on the front of the LA Times and there's no talk of doing anything to this cat. If this was in Florida, somebody would have shot it by now and have half of it hanging on their wall and the rest of it on their carpet. Yeah, just let it do its thing. It lives in LA. The thing is, this is what you have to realize, is Los Angeles is the desert, right? We built a city here, but really we're not supposed to. It's the rolling mountains and the hills, and it's a desert. The fact that we brought water here, Mr. Mulholland brought water here, we shouldn't have done that. This is where P22 lives. This is his habitat. It's not ours. Humans shouldn't even be here. It should be the natural world. So who are we to start telling him where to go? That's my attitude anyway, and I'm sticking with it. Should we check on the US News Update? It's a daily podcast that I do that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. It's 2 minutes of US news, and it would be great to have you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So let's have a little listen now and see what's happening across the US. Here it is. It's Thursday, March 10. On the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. Bipartisan opposition in the Democratic-led U.S. Congress on Wednesday led top lawmakers to strike a plan for $15.6 billion in COVID relief sought by the White House from a $1.5 trillion bill to fund the federal government and aid Ukraine. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi, in a letter to her fellow Democrats, noted that Republicans resisted the money and many House Democrats opposed the way in which the funding was being handled. As a result, Pelosi said the entire $15.6 billion was being removed from the omnibus spending bill to
fund government activities through September 30th. We must proceed with the omnibus today, which includes emergency funding for Ukraine and urgent funding to meet the needs of America's families. The news came following more than 4 hours in which debate on the legislation and votes were frozen as Democratic leadership attempted to resolve the problem. The legislation also contains $13.6 billion in security and humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Also on Wednesday, the House attempted to pass a separate bill that would ban U.S. imports of Russian oil in response to Moscow's invasion. With money for the federal government due to run out at midnight on Friday, the House also plans a vote on a separate measure to keep the government funded. Acting White House Budget Director Shalanda Young urged the House and Senate to act to send the Ukraine aid and government funding measure to the White House for President Joe Biden's signature. Your daily U.S. news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel.
There it is, the US News Update. You can get it wherever you get your podcast. It's 3 minutes after 10 on the West Coast here in California, 3 minutes after 1 Eastern. I'm Anthony Davis. This is the Anthony Davis Show. You have me until 2 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. And then it's your pal Hal. We're going to catch up with him in about 40 minutes' time, find out what's happening in his show today. Let's continue with our look through the morning newspapers. We were just looking at the LA Times and talking about P22, which is the sounds like, I mean, it's such a shame to give P22 just a number, just a number, a letter and a number. He's so much more than that. He's a big cat. Let's go to Napa Valley now, and the Register. Miracle March looks unlikely. This is after the supercharged start to the rain season. About the only thing that could have prolonged Napa County's drought was a dry spell of epic proportions. That's exactly what happened, with Napa State Hospital receiving little rain in January and February, the traditional heart of the rainy season. The County Board of Supervisors on Tuesday declared a drought emergency. Supervisors declared a drought emergency last year too, but it has since lapsed. What now looks to be a third consecutive drought year prompted them to revisit the topic. Interesting. Catalytic converter thefts on the rise is the headline. It says, with just a few minutes, a jack, a wrench, and a cordless saw, a thief can make off with the car's catalytic P22 converter and create expensive headaches for vehicles, owners, and law enforcement agencies alike. A growing problem with the theft of catalytic converters, the devices that scrub pollutants from the exhaust of cars, trucks, and SUVs, has accelerated over the past 3 years, according to local police agencies and automotive crime-fighting advocates. The rate of thefts doubled in the city of Napa from 2020 through 2021 and went up fivefold in the American Canyon to the south, with little slowdown evident so far this year. After recording only 18 thefts of catalysts through 2019, the city of Napa witnessed 112 in 2020, followed by 240 more last year, according to Lieutenant Chase Haag. I mean, this is very interesting to me. What do they do with these things? What do they want to do with these things? Where are they taking them? Is there a big warehouse full of catalytic converters? Are they selling them? Because, all cars for the last 25 years have been made with a catalytic converter. So I don't understand, there's going to be no cars without one, where they're like, oh, well, we could sell that to so-and-so because they're catalytic. I mean, I don't understand it. Is it valuable? Why is there a run on catalytic converters if they're a standard issue thing now? I'm old enough to remember when, in England, they did the campaign to make you get a catalytic converter. You had to have one retrofitted to your car. And the adverts went something like, have you got your cat? Do you remember that, Carla? Have you got your cat? Get a cat. They thought that was clever. The advertising agency thought that was like a clever play on words. County could discuss investigation powers. Napa County might consider dipping a toe into the roiled waters involving potential conflict of interest allegations some citizens have made against County Supervisor Alfredo Pedrosa. Call it a possible discussion over whether to have a discussion. That sounds very typical, doesn't it? Okay, that's the Napa Valley Register. Next up is the Sacramento Bee, who's staying in California. Same coverage of the airstrike hitting the Ukraine maternity hospital, which is really the biggest story of the day. Newsom plans effort to offset skyrocketing fuel costs. This is Gavin Newsom, of course, the governor here in California. He has a plan to help Californians cope with rapidly increasing gasoline prices. The Democratic governor on Tuesday announced during his State of the State speech that he's planning to work with the legislature to provide relief for California drivers. The average gasoline price was $5.44 per gallon on Tuesday, above the national average of $4.17. Newsom in January proposed suspending gasoline and diesel fuel tax, inflation-related increases expected in July, a plan aimed at saving motorists money when prices were rising faster than they had in nearly 40 years. Well, since then, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has put added pressure on prices. In January, he said, we proposed a pause to the gas taxes, and now it's clear that we have to go further. And that's why, working with legislative leadership, I'll be submitting a proposal to put money back in the pockets of Californians to address rising gas prices. Great. Why Californians are paying more for gas than anyone else? We were asking this question earlier. I was saying because they can. It says, oh, interesting. California's gasoline prices are consistently much higher than national average for three big reasons: taxes, environmental laws, and location. California requires a special blend of gasoline to reduce pollution, said Sung Won Song, who is a president of SS Economics at the consulting firm in Los Angeles. He says California is known for high taxes, including on gasoline. California's gasoline prices on Tuesday averaged $5.44 a gallon, as well as well above... There's such a terrible misprint on the front of this Sacramento Bee. They've used the word Tuesday twice. They've written California's gasoline prices Tuesday averaged $5.44 a gallon Tuesday. Love it. Well above the national average of $4.17. The latest price, spurred by skyrocketing crude oil prices, is up a dime from Monday, 61 cents from a week ago, and 172 from a year ago. California gasoline prices are generally higher and more variable than prices in other states because relatively few supply sources offer California's unique blend of gasoline outside of the state. I mean, hang on a second. Are you telling me that you can blend gasoline different to reduce pollution? Why aren't we doing that everywhere? Why is that not a national standard? Why is that exclusive to California? Is it because it works better in hot weather? Is it because the climate is better and therefore the solution can be tweaked? That's very interesting. This is something I want to talk about further. Not necessarily today, but, I'm going to read up on it. It's just very interesting to me. I would presume, because, temperatures have a lot to do with how you burn gas. You are aware of this, right? So on a cold day, you're going to burn more gas than on a hot day. And maybe because California is such a hot state, the average temperature across the year is so warm, maybe it means that it is possible to blend a gasoline that uses less pollutants because it will burn at a higher temperature anyway because the temperature of the state. Which means you could do the same in Arizona because it's warmer in Arizona than it is in California. I mean, this is very interesting data, don't you think? This is kind of good intel. Why didn't we know about this before? Thomas, first time on the show from California, welcome. We're talking about the fact that California gas is a special blend. Reduces particulates because, of course, we have a huge problem with air quality here. It's more expensive because of tax. But also there's only so many suppliers of the California blend. Who knew? Who knew? It's like coffee or, wine. It's a specific blend. Barbara's joined us. Mike as well. Welcome, Mike. Edgar and Hank and Gilberto. Shika. Nice to see you. To see you, nice. Don't have a good day? Have a great day. I got that line from the new movie with Ryan Reynolds called Free Guy, which I highly recommend. Lots of fun. The Sacramento City Unified School District Board voted on Tuesday to lift its mask mandate for students and staff, but only after Sacramento County is in low community level of COVID-19. Well, this is good. You know, I was saying this the other day, like, why on earth are schools wanting to lift mask mandates now? Just wait till spring break. Just wait. Just wait. To Austin now in Texas. Court sides with trans teen's family. Siding with the parents of a transgender teen, a state appeals court on Wednesday rejected Attorney General Ken Paxton's attempts to continue a child abuse investigation to the family's decision to provide gender-affirming medical care to a 16-year-old. Thank goodness for that. Do you remember we covered this story? This is this idiot, you know, the Attorney General, thought that because the parents were providing support to their child who is trans, that constituted child abuse under the laws of Texas. We cannot allow this insanity to continue. It is appalling. And you know, you look to Ukraine and people are desperate and hungry and bleeding. And yet here it's like people are so lucky. Life is so easy that they have nothing to worry about, that they have to start coming up with stuff, making stuff up to have some controversy to enjoy. Try getting bombed and see how that feels. The privilege here is just insane. Paxton had asked the Third Court of Appeals to toss out a week-old temporary restraining order blocking the child abuse investigation, which began based on Governor Greg Abbott's February 22, continues on page 5. This is interesting. A judge has ordered a $67 million award, calling a jury's $67 million award wildly excessive. Sorry, it's the judge that criticizes it. The federal judge has directed the lawyer representing the family of Landon Nobles, who police in 2017 shot and killed in downtown Austin, and the city of Austin to mediate a lower dollar amount. Unbelievable. If challenged, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals would almost certainly reduce the amount based on legal precedent and the case's evidence, U.S. Magistrate and Judge Mark Lane said. The judge recommended that both sides come to an agreement on their own, particularly because the city's been handing out money like candy lately, adding that he's interested to see what amount the city will approve. The city of Austin has so far paid out a total of $13 million to 4 people injured during the city's May. Continues on page 5. How much is a man's life worth if it's not worth $67 million? I mean, this guy was fatally shot by Austin police on the 7th of May 2017. How much is his life worth? You know, this is what public money is for. Pay for it. Or take the money out of the police budget. Or make the police officer who executed him pay for it. Lawmakers consider more oversight of natural gas. Winter is almost over this year, but the state's natural gas industry remains in the crosshairs of those who say it's a potential weak link. In efforts to bolster the Texas electricity grid and prevent a calamity on the scale of 2021's deadly blackouts from ever repeating. A number of state senators called for stepped-up oversight of the natural gas sector during a hearing on Wednesday at the Capitol, suggesting additional legislation might be needed if the Texas Railroad Commission, which regulates the oil and gas industry, asserts that it doesn't have the necessary authority. Wow. Texas has got all sorts of weird energy laws. It's super weird. Time's getting on, so I kind of want to skip some newspapers, and I'd like to jump in a little bit to the war in Ukraine. This is after they're saying that Russia could be planning a chemical or biological weapon attack in Ukraine, and we should all be on the lookout, the White House said. Well, Russia has always denied the chemical weapons allegations and has instead accused the US of building chemical weapons laboratories in Ukraine and Georgia, another pro-Western former Soviet state. The US has said its laboratories in Ukraine and Georgia are focused on human and animal welfare research. The Biden administration warned that Russia could use chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine as it rejected Russia's claim that US biological weapons labs are operating in the war-torn country. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Wednesday called Russia's claims preposterous and warned of disinformation campaigns. She said, "We took note of Russia's false claims about alleged US biological weapons labs and chemical weapons development in Ukraine. We've also seen Chinese officials echo these conspiracy theories." She said that the United States was in full compliance with its obligations under the Convention and the Biological Weapons Convention, which bar countries from developing or possessing such weapons. She said Russia had long maintained a biological weapons program in violation of international law and cited its military intervention in Syria in support of the Bashar al-Assad regime and its suspected poisoning of Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny in 2020 with a Novichok-like nerve agent. She said now that Russia has made these false claims and China has seemingly endorsed this propaganda, we should all be on the lookout for Russia to possibly use chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine or to create the false flag operation for using them. It's a clear pattern, she said. She made the comments after Russian officials accused the United States of developing such weapons in Ukraine. Well, Igor Konashenkov, not Kalashnikov. Igor Konashenkov, the chief spokesman for Russia's defense ministry, said it was obvious that in the wake of the special military operation, the Pentagon started having serious concerns about secret biological experiments uncovered on the Ukrainian territory. It's just not true. It's just not true. Meanwhile, yesterday, I read that the Russian defense ministry announced, or they confirmed, that they've been using these barometric bombs. Now, if you were to look up a barometric bomb, one of these vacuum bombs, in international law, they're illegal. It is illegal to use these things in modern warfare. And yet, it's clear to me that this is the kind of weapons that Russia are using on Ukraine. Britain's Armed Forces Minister James Hepney said earlier today that if Russian President Vladimir Putin did seek to use chemical weapons, he should expect an international response. He did not say whether he meant from NATO or individual countries. The British Prime Minister said he'd read very high intelligence last week about the possibility of Russia using chemical weapons and praised the United States for making public its intelligence on the issue as a deterrent to Moscow. President Putin needs to be clear that the use of chemical weapons is just the most despicable thing that anyone can imagine, they said. I mean, Putin doesn't care. He doesn't care. He just wants to win. He has absolutely no sympathy or empathy with this situation. Doesn't care. So let's just work on the assumption that at some point he's going to use them. We just don't know when. And he's already using vacuum bombs. It's already a war crime. When you bomb a maternity hospital that has no military interests, that's a war crime. I mean, the guy's already on the back foot. The tragedy is that, he's a nuclear-capable country and there's plenty of NATO nuclear-capable countries and they don't want to start a whole war. They just don't. Nicolas Rossi, the man accused of being a fugitive. This is an interesting story we mentioned earlier. It's a little bit bizarre. He was arrested on a COVID ward in a Glasgow hospital and accused by the US authorities of being a fugitive who faked his own death to evade justice. Nicolas Rossi is suspected of a number of sexual assaults and is wanted to face a rape charge in the state of Utah. But the man at the center of the extradition process claims it's a mistake and is challenging them to prove his identity. He was interviewed in Glasgow, where he was in a wheelchair, his voice competing against the hiss of an oxygen mask. He said he's not Nicolas Rossi, the man the Americans wants to extradite on a rape charge in Utah. In fact, he claims he's never even been to America. He says, "I'm Arthur Knight, and this is my wife, Miranda." He claims to have got married in Bristol 2 years ago and produces a wedding certificate, but there is no birth certificate in his pile of documents. He claims this is a consequence of being adopted in Ireland before moving to London in his teens. He says that the US authorities need to prove to him that he is Nicolas Rossi. Authorities in the US confirmed that Mr. Rossi was also known as Nicholas Alaverdian in the state of Rhode Island, where he was involved in local politics and was a critic of the state's child welfare system. In December 2019, he told media in his home state that he had a late-state non-Hodgkin lymphoma and had weeks to live. Several news outlets in Rhode Island reported that he died in February 2020. On December 13th last year, a man who'd been admitted to Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital with COVID was arrested under an international arrest warrant on behalf of prosecutors in Utah. And after a court hearing in January, he was released on bail. At a further hearing last month, Crown Prosecutor Jennifer Johnson said police and hospital staff identified the man as Mr. Rossi from tattoos on his body. Oh, man. That's not true, the man claiming to be Arthur Knight said. He said he refused to show his tattoos. He said, "Honestly, I'm exhausted. If you really want, you could see me pulling up both sleeves tonight. It's nothing personal. I'm just exhausted." Yeah, he's Mr. Rossi. He doesn't want to show his tattoos. Prosecutors in the US say they're sure the man that the Scottish police have arrested is Nicholas Rossi. In January, Utah County Attorney General David Leavitt said there was a rape charge against Mr. Rossi, which dated back to 2008. He said, "Once we determined that he was in a Scottish hospital, we were able to confirm through photographic confirmation and DNA that we had our man. If he denies that he is wanted in Utah, then he'll go through a process where we'll have to demonstrate and satisfy the Scottish courts that he is the individual. The process could take a number of months." I bet he's kind of hoping he'd have died from COVID, you know? It is a Netflix show, yeah. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the dramatized version of this. They showed the interview to his uncle in Connecticut, who in 2020 tried to arrange a memorial service after it was reported his nephew had died of cancer. "It came as a shock when I found out he was still alive. I don't have the answers. I wish I did. I wish I could say it's definitely Nicholas or definitely isn't Nicholas. There's a slight resemblance, but the mannerisms and the weight kind of throw me off a bit." He knows. He's covering up. According to the US TV network NBC10, Rossi's adopted father has no doubt it's him. After viewing an interview with the man who identifies himself as Arthur Knight, David Rossi said, "That's my son." He said he was adopted as a child but not seen him since he divorced from the boy's mother 20 years ago. "I just know my son. That's definitely Nicky. He's older, but it's him," David Rossi said. As a parent, I find it quite strange that people don't see their kids for 20 years. You know, falling out with children and stuff like that. I find it very, very strange. I've just booked to take my children to Disneyland for the first time on Good Friday. You know, isn't that something that every parent wants to witness? Seeing their children walk into the Magic Kingdom for the very first time. See the castle and, you know, all of the... it must be amazing. I cannot wait for that experience. I haven't been to Disney since, 1993. Maybe 1991. Maybe even earlier. That was the last time I went to Disneyland. Anyway, I just thought that story was very interesting. The idea of this guy trying to get out of a rape allegation by pretending to not be the person and just going, "Prove it." Unfortunately, he made the mistake of getting tattoos. If you want to evade identification, don't get your body tattooed, you know? They're very hard to get off. Quick mention of this Capitol riots trial. It's very interesting. This is Guy Reffitt. He became the first person to stand trial for storming the US Capitol. He had to face not only a judge and jury, but his own son on the witness stand. And to those that knew him say he was a big talker, so much so that his defense lawyer used it as his main argument for dismissing the case against him. He stood trial for bringing a handgun to the US Capitol during the January 6th riot. But it was the volume of evidence of the bragging, detailed in texts, videos, and audio, that convinced jurors of his guilt in a unanimous verdict on Tuesday after less than 4 hours of deliberations. The guilty verdict, delivered quickly and on all counts, is a huge victory for the government and is expected to affect the upcoming trials and defense strategy of other defendants indicted by the Justice Department. But Reffitt's trial has also shown how fissures dividing Americans has cracked wide open. It revealed how the deep political divide in the US has affected ordinary Americans and their families, often in a way that is emotionally wrenching and deeply personal. The divide has reached beyond the dinner table to pit family members against one another, in this case, father against son, with far-reaching consequences, because it was Reffitt's son's testimony against his father, whose political views he had long opposed, that formed a crucial part of the prosecutor's case. Weeks before Guy Reffitt drove from his hometown of Wiley in Texas to Washington, D.C. to storm the Capitol, his son Jackson, who was 18 at the time, had already tipped off the FBI. Wow. It was a string of messages from his father on Christmas Eve to the family text chain that alarmed Jackson. In them, the older Reffitt announced his intention to go to the nation's capital to rise up the way the Constitution was written. During his testimony, Jackson said that he reported his father to the FBI because he was worried about his plans. Afterwards, said Jackson, he struggled with feelings of guilt for betraying his father. I just felt gross, he said. At first, Jackson heard nothing from the FBI. Then, in early January 2021, Guy Reffitt got behind the wheel of his wife's Chevrolet with AR-15 rifles stashed away and drove to Washington, D.C. We took the United States Capitol, he texted his family after the siege. We are the Republic of the people. When he returned home to Texas, Gary Reffitt spoke with his son and other members of his family about his experiences. He bragged about his role in the Capitol assault, said Jackson in his testimony. I started the fire, he said. He didn't know that his son was secretly recording him on his mobile phone. He threatened his son, warning him not to tell the authorities. If you turn me in, you're a traitor, his father said, and traitors get shot. Oh, what a lovely thing to say to your own child. Soon after, Jackson spoke with an FBI agent. Within days, his father was arrested. On the day that his son testified against him, Reffitt walked into the courtroom with a swagger. But when Jackson took the stand, Guy's demeanor changed. The big, burly man covered his face with his hands and doubled over in his chair, turning away from his son to hide his tears. The two men looked strikingly similar that day. They both had the same lush locks. Guy kept his hair back in a tight ponytail. Jackson's hair fell loose past his shoulders. They both wore a dark jacket, no tie, and a light-coloured shirt. Guy's shirt was pale blue. Jackson's was pink. I don't quite understand why we're suddenly describing their clothes, but anyway, it seems very weird. Oh, I see. Here's the payoff. But the similarities ended there. Yeah, once their political views diverged, so did father and son. A few years ago, Jackson was moderately left, he testified, while his father was moderately right. That changed after Trump's election in 2016. Afterwards, Jackson said they began to shift. We both went further in our own direction. The rift between the father and son was profound, eating away at their family. Guy's older brother, Nathan Reffitt, a 50-year-old electrician, called Jackson a snowflake and overly sensitive. My nephew turned against his father, Nathan told the reporters while attending his brother's trial. It's sad that our country has come to this. I mean, this is something we should talk about. You know, families have been torn apart by Donald Trump's rhetoric. You realize that? Like, whereas people used to be able to communicate and have some kind of semblance of civility in their communication, now it's become an insane slagging match, literally. People fighting each other, screaming at each other, hating each other. Aggressive language and vile obscenities associated with this. And, you know, the snowflake is the least of their problems. I would love to be called a snowflake. I think it's a beautiful thing, you know, beautiful, beautiful snowflake. Who can think of a more beautiful thing than a snowflake? Is there on this planet a more beautiful thing than a snowflake? But what goes with that is this attitude that somehow to be liberal is to be weak. To be liberal is to be bad. And in England, where I'm from, we don't use liberalism as an insult. In fact, we never use the word liberal. It's barely used. We have a political party called the Liberal Democrats. But you don't say, "Oh, you liberal," because we're all liberal in the UK. Everybody's liberal. Even the Conservatives are liberal. They don't want to ban abortion or bring back the death penalty or remove LGBT plus books from school. All they want to do is maybe spend a little less, or keep the minimum wage where they can see it. That's how Conservatives operate in the United Kingdom. They have some questionable immigration policies, but that aside, and they're Brexiteers invariably. But conservatism in America has now become this huge movement of hatred towards the left. And that is very different to what it used to be like. Of course the left and the right never got on great, but at least they were able to bring bipartisan things together. Nothing has been done in a bipartisan way here. It's all coercing and putting up, barriers. It's so offensive. It's such a shame, because the country needs everybody. Needs both groups, both sides. I don't remember. Oh, I see, like fiscal conservatives, like people who just, there is a growing number. In fact, Adam Kinzinger, who's a conservative serving on the January 6th investigative committee, he's basically not going to run again as a conservative, and he's trying to organize a group called Republicans Against Trump to prove that there should be a space for conservatives to exist who are not avid Trump fans. Because Trump is the person that created the division. Trump is the person that used the bad language. Trump is the person that was critical of the left in a way that had never been said out loud before. Trump is the one who lied through his entire election campaign, continued to lie through his presidency, and lied when he lost the election. And so he gave people license to lie, and people think that that's okay. They think it's normal now. And so there's all this, tragically, there's all this aggression. And they think that's acceptable. It's 10:34. We've got 10 minutes before we talk to Hal. So why don't we talk about Women's History Month? Yay! Catherine's joined us. Felicia, Steve, Eddie, Christina, Jackson, Dave, Julie, Stacy, Thomas, Barbara, Mike. Thank you for joining us all. Welcome. Steve, it's your first time. Dave, your first time as well from Kansas. Steve's in Oregon. Thomas is in California. Barbara and Mike still with us. Thank you very much. We're talking a lot of things this morning, but I want to mention Women's History Month and talk about Lucille Ball, the American actress and pioneer in comedy, the star of the popular television series I Love Lucy, and an entertainer and businesswoman. She continually broke barriers for women in the entertainment business. She was born on August 6, 1911 in Jamestown, New York. Her father died early on, leaving Ball's mother a widow. Eventually, her mother remarried. By the age of 12, Ball knew that she loved being on the stage and enrolled in many acting classes. And in 1925, her mother sent her to John Murray Anderson School for Dramatic Arts. And there she trained under popular teachers, and one of her classmates was future Hollywood star Betty Davis. Unfortunately, Ball did not enjoy her time at school, and the teachers believed that she lacked talent. That's a shame, isn't it? Why would you say that to somebody? She didn't let the opinions of others stop her, though. She started working as a model in 1932, but she was never able to keep steady work. In 1933, she moved to Hollywood. For the next few years, she held small roles in several motion pictures. During this time, she also worked in the theater. In 1940, while working on a movie set, she met Desi Arnaz, a Cuban-American actor. The couple started dating immediately and eloped only a year later. They proved to be a powerful couple. Their relationship was the inspiration behind a television show created by Ball. I Love Lucy premiered in 1951. Ball produced a series in which centered around the marriage of Desi and Lucy. The show was an instant success. It received critical acclaim. It went on to win over 20 awards, including 5 Emmys, and remained on the air until 1957 and created several spin-offs. Ball also used her star power to financially invest in the entertainment business. In 1950, she and her husband created Desilu Productions. The company not only produced I Love Lucy, but it went on to create another hit television show, The Dick Van Dyke Show, and Star Trek. Isn't that crazy? Ball and Arnaz divorced in 1960. When the marital relationship ended, Arnaz decided to sell his ownership of Desilu Productions to Ball. The deal made her the first woman to own a major studio. Ball continued her successful career in film and television and theatre. She guest starred in several popular television shows before she retired in 1974, and despite their divorce, the couple remained friends throughout her life. Additionally, they continued to co-parent their 2 children. Ball's work behind the scenes with Desilu Productions transformed the way studios created and produced movies and TV shows. Many commonplace techniques in television productions, like filming in front of a live studio audience and using 3 cameras, started with Desilu Productions. And although Ball died in 1989, her career continues to influence the work of other female comedians. Throughout her life, she mentored several women, making sure to impart her valuable knowledge to the next generation. Isn't that amazing? There's a few things there I didn't quite realize, like inventing, obviously, some of these techniques. I don't think I've ever seen a full episode of I Love Lucy. I don't think I've ever watched one. Now, of course, I'm going to have to. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure they're all over YouTube as well. She celebrated her 40th birthday before I Love Lucy began airing. In an industry where women are all too often tossed to the side after 35, Lucy got her biggest break when she was already 40 years old. Desi and Lucy were the first TV interracial couple. Before the show began, Lucy insisted that her then-husband, Cuban-American actor Desi Arnaz, be cast as her on-screen husband. Her natural hair color was brown. Before she made a big splash in the comedy world, she appeared as a brunette in earlier headshots. And it wasn't actually all that red on I Love Lucy. She originally dyed her locks in a role in Do Barry Was a Lady, then kept it that way for I Love Lucy, but rather than the vibrant red that we all envisage it to be, her hairstylist described it as more of a golden apricot shade. She was an avid gardener. Now, I know a little bit about this because I've done all the tours of the studios here in Los Angeles, the backlot tours where you go and see them all. And Lucille Ball, I think it might be at Warner Brothers. Oh, no, maybe it's Paramount. I think it's at Paramount. Yeah, it's at Paramount. They show Lucille Ball's office, and she wanted it to be made out like her home. So they recreated it. They did anything for these stars, and they love to build on the backlots and make stuff, just so. And so they built her like a whole front garden and a whole area where she could do some gardening when she wasn't on set and when she wasn't working, and made it a home from home because, of course, these people spend so much time in the studios. And it's very interesting. If you're ever in California and you want to do the backlot tours, I've done Warner Brothers, Universal, and Paramount, and I thought that's all there was. And then I just found out, and I've bookmarked the page, that you could also tour Sony Pictures. And I didn't know that Sony had a tour, so I'm going to go and do that one now. I'm such a tourist. I love it. She kept her trademark hair color for more than 4 decades. She preferred not to go grey. She kept her stunning hue all the way until 1989. Well, there's a photograph here of her with Bob Hope. I've never actually seen her as an older person, I don't think. But, she's wearing a giant wig. They say she kept her stunning hue. Just say she wore a golden wig. She looked great. Her first baby was a daughter, born when she was 40, and her second when she was nearly 42. And they gave their names to their kids as well. They called their daughter Lucy and their son Desi. Isn't that cute? Where was the statue put up to commemorate her? Was it somewhere obvious? Oh, Christina's joined us. First time on the show from Michigan. Hello. Steve from Oregon. First time. Catherine, Felicia, Eddie, Jackson, Dave, Stacy, Julie, Thomas, Barbara, Mike, Edgar, Hank, Gilberto, and Shika. Welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. We just sit here and we've been discussing the news for the last 2 hours, looking at what's happening across the US, but also more importantly in Ukraine. We've been talking about the bombing of the maternity hospital there and all the fallout from that, and just getting our heads around why this type of thing is happening, and who's to blame ultimately. Because I think that people are looking around now and they're like, should I be blaming one solitary person? And the reality is no. This is a whole series of world events. It's a little bit like why gas prices have gone high. Jen Psaki at the White House press briefing yesterday answered a question from that idiot who works for Fox News who keeps asking stupid questions. And he's like, why is it that Biden is now blaming the rise on gas prices on Putin's war in Ukraine? Isn't it convenient when it was going up anyway? And she's like, she almost looked at him and said, just don't be an idiot. Markets, world forces, events, they change the price of oil all the time. It's volatile. That's the whole point. And world events change the price. That's standard. Putin didn't invent that. Biden didn't invent that. So yeah, of course, the war in Russia has affected the cost. Previously, coronavirus affected the cost. It's not one thing. It can be multiple things. And that's what makes it interesting. We're going to chat with your pal Hal in just a few seconds and find out what he's up to and, see how his show is going to be progressing on this Thursday. I can't believe it's the 10th of March already. It's just whizzed by. This year is whizzing by. I'm terrified, really, because I don't want to get to the midterms in November. I feel like there's still so much to get done. And the fact that they haven't passed voting rights yet is the thing that worries me the most. How do we get to the place and the point where voting rights is like a major issue? Do you know in Texas, I think, where they've changed all the law, or was it Florida, somewhere where they've changed all the law on voting to make it more difficult to vote? They ran a vote a couple of days ago and they found that 27,000 votes had been set aside or had been not counted because of these new laws. 27,000 votes, which proves that the Republican plan to prevent black people from voting is working. Crazy. Is Hal there? Should we say hello to him and welcome him into our little space? I think he'll be in a second. Oh, the Lucille Ball statue. Yes, that's exciting. It says that it's in... it's in Ball's hometown of Celeron, New York. Today would have been the TV legend's 105th birthday. That was on August the 6th, 2016. So that was the day that they unveiled the statue, and it is a completely horrific statue. She looks like a scary clown. Why they would do that, I have no idea. What a shame. Yes, they're calling it Scary Lucy. Oh, Lovely Lucy replaces Scary Lucy. Oh, I see. So they're saying that there was a Scary Lucy before. Oh, yeah, I can see the Scary Lucy statue. Yeah, she does look horrendous. So they've replaced that with a newer one, which is supposed to be happy. And I'll be honest, the new one looks just as scary. So I don't know what they were thinking. But to me, I just don't know that immortalizing people in bronze these days is very easy. You know, I think you need to go back to the days of the great sculptors, of the Michelangelos, to get a decent bronze out of anybody. You know? Hal, welcome to share the screen. Where are you? Oh, you're over here. There you are. Look at that. Are you
Greetings,
a fan
Anthony.
Of Lucille Ball and I Love Lucy?
Yeah, as much as the next guy. I think she's a groundbreaker. She's on the Mount Rushmore of, definitely female TV actors, comedians. So, yeah, I have not seen Being the Ricardos as of yet. I think it's available to watch on Amazon Prime.
What is that? Is that...
Oh, what it's Being the Ricardos is the film about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. And it stars Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball and Javier Bardem as Desi Arnaz.
Is that new?
It came out in 2021. It's actually Nicole Kidman is nominated for Best Actress, nominated for an Oscar, and it was written and directed by Aaron Sorkin.
Oh, wonderful.
You know, the man behind The West Wing, etc.
Yeah, because my two favorite shows he's done.
West Wing and Newsroom?
Newsroom and... That's just the other one that I love.
Sports Night? Studio 60?
I love that you know the name.
West Wing, not West Wing.
It must be West Wing. It must be West
Must
Wing.
be
I thought there
West
was
Wing.
another one, but there isn't. You're right.
So yeah, I haven't seen it, but it was met with some mixed, mainly positive, but mixed. And
okay. And it's on Amazon Prime, you say?
Yes,
Okay.
Being the Ricardos. But why do you ask about Lucy?
Because we're doing Women's History Month, and we are kind of celebrating her today. Specifically, we're trying to do a different person every day. And today she's the top of our list. And we were just looking at a statue of her in her hometown in New York State. And it was so horrific that in 2016, they replaced it with one that was slightly better looking.
I actually remember this story.
Yeah.
If you want to see another weird statue, I think there was one of footballer Cristiano Ronaldo that was... oddly, it looked cross-eyed. Again, he's a very handsome gentleman, if I do say so myself. And yeah, his bust, his bronze bust or his statue, came out kind of sideways.
Yeah, I was saying that it's almost like they've forgotten how to do sculpture. You know, all of the great sculptors have died, and all that's left
where is Rodin when you need him?
Right. This is my point. Yeah.
I would hold next to Lucille Ball in the same regard. I feel like one of the greats walks among us today, Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Yes, I would agree with that. She is so brilliant. She was in Seinfeld, of course.
Yes, and then Veep, an amazing show as well. And then she also won an Emmy for a show that I haven't really seen, but The New Adventures of Old Christine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty wonderful. I enjoyed her. I think she was on an episode of Comedians in Cars getting coffee with.
Sure.
And I keep going back to that show. I'm sure you do too. It's on Netflix. You know, it's with Jerry Seinfeld just driving around in a classic car that he chooses to match the personality of the comedian that he's picking up. And they go get coffee. And I always fast forward the first bit, you know, when he's like talking about the car. I love cars, but I think I prefer the camaraderie of the two of them together. And
sure.
I even like the phone call when you hear him phone them and they answer, "Hello?"
Yeah.
They're like, "Jerry?"
There's a little bit of awkwardness and testing the waters there. Yeah, that's delightful. Yeah, and it's the kind of show I enjoy. Shows like this where you can just jump in anywhere, anytime, any episode, and your chances of enjoying it are high, as opposed to something you have to be. Oh, am I caught up? Am I following it? Or what was happening preceding this? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, short and sweet. The Obama episode is actually one of the best ones. He drives up to the White House and chooses a car for Obama that is so perfect. I think, Obama was an anomaly in American history, wasn't he? To have somebody who is that cool with that much swagger and is that with such a smile and personality and charisma, who is genuinely like a good person and wants to do best by everybody. I mean, that was a very random thing, to get somebody who was that skilled in that job.
Yeah, I was a big fan. Just, he was human, compassionate, bright. He really was the best of us, And then, wow, we sure did an about face.
That's often what happens, though, isn't it? You get one extreme to the other, because here's the thing. When I was living in England and I was on the radio and I was covering the inauguration of Obama, I thought, and the way I covered it was actually inaccurate. I said that this is a huge thing for America. Everybody in America is obviously behind the fact that this is the first black president, and there's a huge shift for American cultural history and for civil rights and everything. And I failed to acknowledge the fact that half the country was so appalled at the idea of a black man in the White House, so mortally offended by it, and how it went against all of their ideals of white supremacy, that it effectively gave us Trump 8 years later.
Yeah, absolutely.
These people were compelled to vote for a fascist.
Yeah. If you go back, I think it was a combination of that and, on during International Women's Month, I think it's worth pointing out, part of the reason why Hillary Clinton did not get elected president is because some people are so deeply, not just racist, but misogynist, and could not bring themselves to vote for a woman, or had this double standard. I actually heard this from a friend of mine that who is actually a good person, but he voted for Trump. But he's a father, he's philanthropical, blah, 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 blah. But he said, I don't respect her because she stayed with her philandering husband. So you vote for the philanderer-in-chief, Trump? I think a lot of people had, a million and one reasons. They just don't like a strong woman, and they don't feel used to it. They feel put off by it. But yeah, you're right. It was just a perfect storm. And I think what you pointed at, as far as the racism bringing back these people, like, we have to get that office back by hell or high water. And yep, there we go. We got Trump.
What's happening on the Your Pal Hal show today?
Oh, a lot of silly stuff, Anthony. Yesterday, you know who we had on as a guest?
I do not.
A dinosaur wearing sunglasses.
Oh, wonderful. This is where it's at, right?
Yeah. So there's going to be silliness, a lot of pop culture, a little bit of world events, and you know what? Just a smorgasbord.
Thrilled. Okay. We'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you very much. That's your pal and mine, Hal. He's next. I'm Anthony. I'm back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. Have a really good Thursday.